Hey everyone, and welcome back to 100 Days of Coding JavaScript. Today, I'm going to talk about scope. Now, what is scope? Scope is about variable visibility or variables visibility. Now, when we define a variable, the location of that variable tells us like where it's going to be visible and where it's going to be accessible. Let's understand this with an example. I'll switch back to my code editor. And you see here, right, we're going to talk about JavaScript scope. So I'm going to define a variable here using something called let. So I'll define maybe a variable called first name is equals to Sandeep. Okay. So this variable which I have defined here belongs to something called a global scope. So in JavaScript, there we have two different type of scope. I would say a global scope and a local scope. So I'm going to define a function here. Let's say function greet. And inside that greet, I'm just going to print console.log. And then I'm going to say hello space. And then I'm going to concatenate that with name, not name, first name. And I'm going to call this function. Save. See that I'm getting hello Sandeep. So this function greet is also defined in something called a global scope. The first name is also defined in the global scope. So whatever we define here inside index.js or any other JavaScript file directly, right, straight away, they belong to something called a global scope. Now, a variable can belong to a global scope and even a function can also belong to a global scope. Now, I'm going to change something here. I'm going to take this variable from here. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut this variable from here and I will move it inside this function greet. I'm going to save and you see the same output, right? So what is happening here, right? Inside my greet function, I have moved the variable first name. Now this variable first name belongs to this greet function, which is local to this greet function. So if I try to access this first name variable outside, so suppose if I try to access first name here, see what will happen. See that? Uncaught reference error, first name is not defined because this variable first name belongs to the greet function only. It is defined inside the greet function. So it is accessible only inside the greet function. So this is nothing but this variable first name is local to the greet function and it's not available outside here. Now I can redefine this variable again. Say suppose I can say let first name is equals to, just for the sake of other name, I'm going to use Sonia. Okay. Now I'm calling the greet function, right? So now I have defined first name equals to Sonia, which is in the global scope. And I have redefined a first name inside the greet function, which is Sandeep, right? Which is its local scope. Now what is going to happen? When I'm going to call the greet function, right? What it is going to print, hello first name. Is it going to Sandeep or Sonia? This could be a very good interview question, right? And here console.log first name. I know this is going to print Sonia only because this is not accessible here. Let's see what is going to happen here. I'm going to save. See that this console.log is printing Sonia, right? And then I'm calling the greet function, which is printing hello Sandeep. So this is called something called this concept is known as shadowing, where the variable with the same name are getting shadowed, right? So if you define something with the name of first name in the global scope, and if you redefine the same variable with the same name, it's going to behave as a different variable. So it's shadowing this first name with this first name, which is Sandeep. Pretty simple, right? So you just need to remember two concepts, a global scope. So variables we define here belongs to a global scope, and anything which we define inside a function is known as a local scope. And the local variables are only accessible inside a function, but not outside the function. Pretty important, right? Now, I'm just going to go a little bit deeper here, where I'm going to define another function, say inner function. inner fn, I'm going to say it, all right? So a function can have another function, right? So this is little bit difficult. I just wanted to cover basics of scope in this video, because while we are building the project, I want to cover all of these topics, and there will be a separate series related to interview questions where I'm going to talk about all this concept in detail, but a little bit I want to talk. So a function can have an inner function. I can call this inner function here, something like this. Now this inner function can access this variable as well as this variable. So this is called a scope chain, right? So inner function can access the variables from its parent function and even from the global scope. So say suppose I define maybe another variable called inner var here, okay? And let's say 10. Now this inner var is not accessible inside a greet function or even outside in the global scope. This belongs to only the inner function. So this is the concept, important concept I want to cover. Probably I'm going to remove it or I'm going to keep it for now. But this is also important where you just need to remember really simple, think like you're creating different boxes. So this is a box, right? Whatever you define inside that box is going to be accessible only inside that box. But this inner box can see the outer box and even the other outer box. But we can't see from this outer box into this inner box. That's the idea. So this is all about, basics of scope, which I wanted to cover in this video. I'll be having a separate video where I'm going to talk about block scope, then lexical scope and all those concepts. They're a bit advanced, and this series, where 100 days of coding, where I'm just talking about the tools. These are some of the tools which we will need while building projects in JavaScript. So these are very basic things, basic tools you should carry with you so that you should start writing code in JavaScript. That's the intention of these videos. There will be a separate series where I'm going to cover all of these topics in details related to interviews and related to some of the better ways of writing code in JavaScript. With that, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to see you in the next video of 100 days of coding JavaScript. Until then, you take care, goodbye, and thanks for watching the video.